DARAKHSHAN Qurban. She is representative of Hazara community who is facing persecution inside Balochistan. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm wondering how many people here were at the conference earlier today at the council. Could you raise your hands just so I know what to cover? And okay, so about half the room. So I will not repeat too much, but I want to just touch base with those who haven't heard about the Hazara persecution. So what's going on in Pakistan is an extension of what's going on with the Hazaras in the rest of the region. So the Hazaras in Pakistan have separate issues, but they're intricately connected with what's going on in Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, the Hazaras have historically been persecuted since the 1800s when the state building project began. And so over 60% of their population has been massacred and wiped out. This is from the 1800s, and then they were enslaved and they had oppression and persecution for the century after that. There were massacres during the Taliban era, the Mazar-e-Sharif massacre and the massacres in Bamiyan and different parts of Afghanistan killed over, even in one killing, there was over 10,000 Hazaras that were massacred, and there were multiple killings throughout the civil war. When the US entered Afghanistan in 2001, there was for the first time a peace period for Hazaras where they began to finally have access to education, to politics, to a lot of things that were denied to them for a long time. However, ever since NATO withdrew since they withdrew in 2014, the situation has deteriorated significantly, and there is increasing violence from the Taliban, from the ISIS branch that is in Afghanistan, and they are being persecuted on multiple grounds. The first is because of sectarian reasons, because of their Shia faith. The Hazaras are a Shia minority in Afghanistan, which is predominantly Sunni Muslim. Secondly, because of their ethnic history. Again, the Hazaras are easily identifiable from their Asian and Mongolian features. So in Pakistan, the issues are very similar, but it has an entirely different history. When the Hazaras were persecuted in Afghanistan, many of them migrated to Pakistan in Quetta, and they settled there. And so some of them have been there since the late 1800s, and some of them have been there more recently from the persecution from the Taliban. There is a long-standing history of persecution in Pakistan as well because of the sectarian violence that has been going on for many years. But once again, with the entrance of new actors who are, there have always been terror attacks, of course, in the region, but more recently, ISIS has made more of a presence. And I think that in this talk versus the last one, I want to focus more on the global, I guess, zooming back out and looking at the global picture of what's going on. I think that it's easy to look at what's happening to the Hazaras as an issue in a vacuum. It's easy to see persecution on its own without understanding the historical, political, economic context. But since there's such a diverse group of people here who are all being affected in the same region by similar actors, I think it's really important to look at how economic interests play into this. We have a poster up there that was talking about the resources in Balochistan, the exploitation of them. I think that when we realize that the war in Afghanistan, the violence in Pakistan is tied to political economic interests, we can go further with finding a solution. I think that this is not the only region in the world, obviously, where economic interests and resources are playing into the violence, but I think that although it appears on the surface as an issue between Sunni, Shia, violence around the world, the deeper picture behind that is that, the division of a people can make economic exploitation easier for people who are looking into that. So, comparing to what's happening around the world, I think that the issue for the people in Balochistan can only be resolved when the great powers decide so. For the Hazara in Pakistan, a big reason why they're being persecuted by ISIS is because of their presence elsewhere in the world. Hazara refugees have gone and fled to Iran. Hazara refugees in Iran have been coerced into being sent into Syria to fight a war that is not theirs. When they're in Syria, they are put on the front lines, and so ISIS has they have directly, had conflict with ISIS there because of a war that was not their own, and so therefore ISIS has, incentive to continue that conflict in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Looking into what's going on with the exploitation of resources in the entire region. We've discussed in the last panel a little bit about how vulnerable the region is to exploitation that is economic and focused on the minerals. If we can put the poster back up, I think it'd be useful to refer to it. But again, I don't want to take up too much time from the other speakers, but I will reiterate what I mentioned in the last panel. So in Pakistan, the Hazara population is between 0.5 and 0.6 million. They're concentrated in Quetta, and essentially over the course of the past 15 years, thousands have been killed and over 4,000 have been wounded in a series of over 200 attacks. A report released last year stated that over 509 members of the Hazara community were killed and 629 were injured in many incidents of terrorism in Quetta from 2013 to 2017 alone. And the attacks include assassinations, suicide bombings, rocket shellings, and the targeting of public gathering places where Hazaras worship, where they go to the market, sports clubs. The aim has clearly been to target civilians. There are many situations where Hazaras have been targeted in public, on public transport, and they've been kidnapped or taken away, and they've been found dead later. Even though security has slightly improved in recent years, a lot of Hazaras have moved into guarded enclaves, but this also restricts them, and this restricts their movement in the area. And so the sectarian attacks continue, but the community members feel as though they're living in an open jail. Hazara town is only 4 square kilometers, so when you think about that being the only safe place for people, and when you exit or enter, you're constantly at risk for attacks, and the fact that they're all concentrated in one area makes it very easy for suicide bombers and for bombings to kill a lot of civilians very quickly. In the last few years, many civil servants, many students, many businessmen, people have been leaving their jobs. Students have left their studies. There is very little security for Hazaras, and so essentially, despite their protests, despite their hunger strikes, there is little to no response from the international community. The individuals and groups responsible for these killings, they are known to the Pakistani state. They are often held by Al-Qaeda affiliated Sunni Muslim extremist militant groups. There is the Taliban, there is Daesh, there's also Lashkari, Jangavi, there's a lot of different militant groups, but none of them have ever been apprehended, charged, or brought to justice. And so the problem here is that there's no accountability, there's no mechanism, or there's no insurance for the Hazaras that attacks will be punished, and there's no safety and security for them. And so I think the key thing here is to realize that a lot of these groups and individuals who are responsible for massacres enjoy protection from the government or community. And until we address this core issue, the terrorist activities against Hazaras and other minority groups will continue. And so I guess the main call I have here is to hopefully be able to mobilize on this issue, collaborate, and realize that there's a lot of overlap between all our shared interests.
Thank you.